do we call ourselves? The Board of Regional Commissioners?
I think when the Assembly voted to make us county commissioners again,
the Board of
we are whatever you want to call us.
Then I will say welcome and good morning to the June 23rd meeting of the Board of Regional Commissioners of Barnstable County. And we'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before beginning our business, we will take a moment of silence to remember our troops who are serving overseas and for those who have passed away. Thank you. And we have Paul Niedzwiecki from the Cape Cod Commission and Patty Daly, and we're going to get an update on NSTAR.
Yes.
For starters?
Yeah, we're going to start off with NSTAR. We had a good meeting with NSTAR last week, so we're trying to put the logistics together before we get the boots on the ground out there in these rights of way. And NSTAR has been very cooperative to date, so they're actually going to help us by providing GPS equipment, which will allow us to put more people in different places so we can expedite the process of mapping these rights of way. They're also going to share all of their information that they have as a baseline for our work going forward. And so we have notified all the towns. We've heard from all 15 towns, and 13 of the towns want to take us up on our offer for technical assistance. The 2 towns that don't are Sandwich and Eastham, because we worked with Eastham last year. So that work is done, and Sandwich has completed their work in the right-of-way on their own. And so we are going forward in the other 13 towns.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Eastham in particular had an advocate, I believe, that came forward and was very concerned about this.
Laura, is it Laura Littlefield? Laura like that, Kelly of Littlefield's Nurseries, a young woman.
Young woman.
Yes.
Who's spoken Harwich about this.
Yes, I'm in contact with her.
What is their story now? Is this something that she supports?
Well, she does support it, but they would like to do more. So what I am trying, this was that subcommittee that I had mentioned to. She was the person. So I am reaching out to Green Cape and maybe even Silent Springs, see if we could just bring these people together and look at the direction they should go into, because their concern are herbicides in general, and they would like to see them banned or replaced with something safer, and that really is something on the state level. So if we can help them organize themselves to make that case to the state, then their energies will be placed in the right direction, as opposed to just saying that this is something that should take place.
Although that's very important.
And also she's going to bring a gentleman in. We want to meet with Paul on who said he was able to ban herbicides in Marblehead. Okay,
and that's very important in it. But in this context, if we're not working with Eastham, and this advocate is from Eastham, my question is very narrowly focused. Is she in support of the fact that we are not working with Eastham during this monitoring phase?
We have worked with Eastham. We worked with Eastham actually last year. They were the first community that we went out and did the mapping on the rights of way for. That really served as an example and allowed us to believe that we could actually do this work Cape-wide. So the right-of-way work in Eastham is done. I think there are emerging 2 different issues. Mm-hmm. What the commission has offered to do is to provide. We got NSTAR to agree not to spray this year, to give us time specifically to work in these rights of way to get the maps as accurate as possible. And so that's the nature of the technical assistance offer that's out there. Eastham doesn't need to do it because we did it for them last year.
Well, as long as there had been some talk about us doing monitoring of wells, and if they're not spraying, clearly there's no need of doing any well digging or monitoring.
Well, the monitoring is still on the table because we have to look at potentially going forward. So there have been some preliminary conversations with the Department of Agricultural Resources on a monitoring program, which would focus on the Outer Cape, and we would locate some wells down there. So we've had those preliminary conversations. So there are 3 issues. There's the mapping on the right-of-way. There's a monitoring program, which I would very much like to see, to establish a baseline for what's already in the drinking water out there. And then there is this larger issue of herbicides, pesticides. And so the commission has taken on the right-of-way work. We certainly will follow up on the monitoring work too. The larger issue, and I think this is what Commissioner Lyons was getting at earlier, is while we have the opportunity over the next 12 months, is somebody going to sponsor a regional discussion about pesticides, herbicides in general?
The issue of sponsorship is a very important one to me, not just of sponsoring the conversation, but sponsoring the support of the cost of doing these wells.
Right.
Is that something that you that is part of your ability to cover in the budget that you have presently?
Agricultural Resources has offered to cover
They have.
the cost of monitoring the wells on the Outer Cape. That's the initial discussions. They have actually offered to do that in a tri-party agreement between Department of Agricultural Resources, the Cape Cod Commission, and NSTAR.
That's good.
So there'll be a pooling of resources from outside sources, but we'll be at the table, so there'll be an honest broker and we'll be able to monitor and establish a baseline.
A perfect position for us.
Yeah, I think so. So that's where we're at. The thing that remains to be done is, I think, a larger regional discussion about herbicides, pesticides in general. I know that the Commission has come under fire with a couple of letters to the editor in the Cape Cod Times, I think from Harwich, someone from Harwich, who sort of alleged that we endorsed NSTAR's spraying program. And I think for those that were familiar with the discussion, we specifically did not endorse their spraying program, and that's what took so long to sort of close on the agreement. So I tried to clarify that with a response, I think, that ran last Sunday. But our position is there should be no spraying of herbicides or pesticides on or near any public or private drinking water supplies. And that's what I can credibly say that we can do in these rights of way. The larger issue, though, is the Cape is already designated as a sensitive area for NSTAR. They can only use certain types of herbicides. They are identified as low-level herbicides. They are things that are very similar to you, that you could get going to Home Depot or Bradford's to pick up to use on poison ivy in your own lawn. It also raises questions from farmers, the National Seashore, and other towns that use the same thing too. So I think, in fairness, what we can't do is hold NSTAR to a higher standard than we hold ourselves. And we're only going to get to that level of discussion if there is a broader regional discussion about who's using what and everybody's involved, everybody has a voice.
I'd just like to add one other thing, that there's been a constitutional precedent that states, and I would presume local entities, can have more restrictive requirements with regard to the application of either a statute requirements or federal, for example, a federal regulation is a minimum standard, and we could certainly be within our rights based upon what constitutional tests that I'm aware of making a more restrictive standard. But it is, as you suggest, something that has to be equally applied across all of the applications.
That certainly holds true when you're talking about environmental regulations pursuant to the EPA. But I think that the issue of primacy and whether the state is in charge or whether the feds are in charge, and the issue of having more restrictive local ordinances are really governed not by constitutional principles, but by principles of that create that organization. There are certain federal regulations out there that actually prohibit localities from permitting activities at all. Most of them relate to public safety along railways and other issues like that. So it's not a universal principle, but it is one that's generally held.
That also, you mentioned railroads, because I think Cape Cod Railroad also sprays along the tracks.
Yeah.
I don't know if it falls within the same, or it has the same level of concern, or should be as NSTAR. But
Cape Rail has some pretty good maps, but they operate under specific federal preemption that would not allow us to regulate the railways. But should it be part of a larger discussion? Yeah. I think we have to look at what everybody's doing in order to make sure that whatever sort of regional consensus we come to about the application of these chemicals, that is equally applied to everyone, at least within our ability to do that.
I would suggest in the case of involving Cape Rail in a larger discussion that get the cooperation of the Cape Cod Regional Transportation Authority, which has more or less an oversight role in parts of this. And I believe that we probably would get cooperation from them to support this discussion.
Yeah, they have used it. They have done it in the past. It's sort of past practice for them.
Yes.
And whereas, NSTAR is trying to prevent trees over a course of a decade or so from interfering with the lines, the movement of the rail, the cars on the rail tracks is a day-to-day public safety concern. And to the extent that the vegetation encroaches in the revetments that hold up the tracks, you can compromise public safety there. So it's a different kind of preemption.
You mentioned the trees that are overhanging. That is an issue that NSTAR has not been actively, pursuing on a regular basis. While they used to have arborists that would go out and manage the trees and the branches, they don't do that other than on what I would call a reactive basis now.
Yeah,
so it's important for people that that see the significant overhangs on on wires. To notify NSTAR to get them out to, let's say, to respond to that.
Yeah, at least in the rights-of-way ever since the blackout a few years back, where they were heavily fined, and it was all caused by one tree that blacked out the entire Cape just about. They have been aggressively, mechanically managing the rights-of-way in an extreme way. I mean, they're just cutting everything that lives out. And that's created several other environmental issues with the way that they've graded some of the roadways through there and how much they've cut back and what comes back after they cut it back and the impact on habitat. And it's a destructive means, the mechanical representation. So they want to get this naturally occurring low growth stuff established to block out the other things. So their thought process on how to manage these rates away long term is excellent. The question is how do we get there in the safest way possible. So I think that's it. Do we have anything else?
Can I ask you, what are you guys suggesting in terms of sponsorship of this regional discussion?
Well,
haven't we got that far yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we need to get going sooner rather than later, because these efforts are going to take some time, and we're up against the clock here. I think the Commission has taken a big chunk out of this in a very practical way for mapping these rights away and dealing with the monitoring program. I think it would test our capacity, and I think it's probably beyond our pay grade to sort of sponsor this on our own. Although we would be happy to have a part of it, but I think it might be an appropriate role for the commissioners of the county to take on, to name an ad hoc committee and set an agenda to have these kinds of discussions.
Well, I would hope that we would convene it sooner rather than later.
It is only
perhaps before September 14th might be an appropriate time to do this.
It is.
I didn't know what you're talking about.
I didn't know what you were talking about.
I know what he's talking about.
But it basically was put off because Paul was out for a long. I mean, we were ready to go, Laura and this gentleman, and he was out. So now, and then he's had to kind of regroup on all these other things he had to do. So I will call her.
Yeah, but I would just encourage you to be as inclusive as possible. Make sure that the Farm Bureau is involved.
Oh yeah, I've already spoken with Leo. He would like to be part of it.
Because those are voices we didn't hear 6 months ago that I think really need to be heard.
Yeah, I've already contacted a few.
So that would be great.
So is there a sense that we should convene this, or at least begin the process of naming this ad hoc committee?
I would say,
Yeah.
yes.
I would suggest that perhaps Sheila might be an appropriate person to organize this.
Yeah, well, I'm sort of in the process of it, yeah.
Okay.
And then perhaps you could
Report
let us
back?
know, yes.
Yes, I will. I'll report back, and I'll report back even.
Meeting, is it?
We're not meeting next week.
Next week,
So
so maybe our first meeting in July?
That
Is
would
that
be
2
fine.
weeks from now?
That's 2 weeks
At
from
least
now.
to let us know.
And I can communicate with you through my.
Yeah, you have other county departments.
Right.
Bill Clark is the
yeah.
guy who's
Right,
studied
he
this.
should be
He has a different sort of opinion on this than the one that's been prevalent in the press over the last 6 months. So I think this really sort of would be beneficial for everybody.
Right.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Could I ask you, this is not on the agenda, and I don't want to ask
We're not
you
gonna
if,
deliberate.
what?
We're not going to deliberate.
No, we
this
can't,
last
no,
night.
it's
not July 1st.
informational.
It's July 1st.
I'm just curious as to where the study is with the fire chiefs. You know, using the local services grant funds. Has that begun, or is there any, no, it hasn't. No RFP or anything like that?
They haven't.
No, is that in their hands? They're the ones that are supposed to do this?
Is this the communication study, or which
Yeah,
study
the-
are you talking
right.
about?
Yeah.
Well,
the
they actually
communications-
applied now for a separate
Right.
911
Right, they
grant.
applied for a different
They're
money.
Which
not
is-
Oh,
applying
they've
through
applied,
us.
oh,
Yeah, it's in
okay.
process. Still,
So it's really in their hands, it's, you're not involved in
We
it?
still talk to
Yeah.
them. I mean, there are components I think we might be able to be helpful, but it was not something I think we were going to be able to fund on our own.
no, it got bigger than
Yeah,
the
it
local
got
technical
bigger.
assistance
And
grant.
the state was not really that thrilled about using it for that particular purposes. The state would, I think, to cut to the chase, the state wanted us to look at both fire and police. And the fire officials couldn't deliver the police officials and didn't want to go there. And so I think that makes it difficult to use DLTA money going forward,
But
unless it's a broad, comprehensive public safety stuff.
am I right, though, that the police are on board with this at this point?
I believe, yeah, both fire and police are
I
pursuing.
think so,
Yes,
yeah,
that's
although
right.
it's heavily weighted to the fire
Yeah.
service
It
at
is.
this point in time, yeah.
But they're in the discussions,
I
and they're
believe
going
they're in the
forward on how they're going to do,
discussions,
and they're going to participate in this survey and the study that they're doing, so.
Yeah, so I think what we had, because the county commissioners had moved forward with a supplemental request for a study to look at assessing.
Right.
And so, and we're under a time frame to spend the DLTA money before the end of the calendar year, which is also another pressing issue, and the police and the fire communication study was coming together more slowly, especially given its interaction with the 911 grant. So what we decided to do was to sort of swap. So if the county was going to push for the assessors, we can do assessors through DLTA and deliver by the end of the year. And so that leaves, some ambiguous county interest and involvement participating in the study as soon as they sort of figure out whether they get the 911 grant.
Well, I bring this up only because if now the police are involved and we're talking about maybe regional dispatch, now the Assembly has voted the ordinance for the CMET, to create the oversight committee. But I think it would be awkward or difficult to move forward in that direction when this group is moving in a different direction. Or how does the CMED fit into what they're doing? I guess I'm not asking you really, I'm just...
Well, if you're asking me for my opinion.
No, I really wasn't, I was just...
I would offer it.
Yes, yes, I'm asking you for your opinion.
I think the CMED involvement has been a great regional success, and I think you should build any sort of regional communication study off of that process. I mean, we would be happy to support it in any way that we can, but I think that's exactly what needs to happen. I mean, that's sort of a roadmap for, I think, how to sort of put this thing together.
Right.
Although, Pat, I would say the CMED ordinance itself creates kind of a board of trustees
Just the oversight.
that's charged with kind of coming up with and handling resources in terms of funding to pay for the CMED, and then procuring the service. Doesn't kind of deal with where the CMED service lies or whose authority or where it's parked.
Right.
But that committee and that oversight committee is ultimately, I think, a good thing, because in the end they're going to have to go that way if they're involving police. And
Yeah, I would share your concern that they would happen separately and not
Right.
Yeah,
at least
because-
with knowledge of one another.
Well, and this is the CMED, the oversight committee, and the activities related to that are dependent upon a funding source.
Yeah.
And what the chiefs are doing in terms of dispatch also has to have a funding source. I mean, I know that there is some funding source through the sheriff, but if they want to add to that, it's going to change the way they operate, and it's going to have funding issues associated with it too. So I'm just thinking that we just need to move forward with our CMET.
Yes.
I will say,
And
And
keep it
just
in
stay in
tandem.
touch with the chiefs on...
Patty and I are headed down to Eastham after this meeting to meet with Sheila Van Hoff and Paul Seeloff from Wellfleet and Eastham, talk about the public safety study that we used DLTA funds for last year, and that came up with some low-hanging fruit recommendations for our regional efforts down there. So we are moving into the implementation phase down there. One of the topics that's been discussed that came out of that report was each individual police force now has a prosecutor that's assigned to the district court down here, and so they've got to interview witnesses and travel down, and that seems to be inefficient. So they're talking about maybe pooling those resources for that one person. So we would gladly participate from that level, looking at those sort of regionalized public safety issues that were a component of that study. But the CMed funding issues, I mean, all of this is so related that there shouldn't be separate processes.
What time is your meeting?
1:30.
Oh. Because I didn't say it would be late if it's 11:30. Was there something else?
Well,
Bill?
I have a couple of other updates.
Yes, that's right.
The Ocean DCPC that you nominated, we are in the process of putting together the 3 committees that are going to take care of that. The first one is the policy committee, and so we're looking for elected officials from all the chief elected boards on the town. I think we've got 8 of them so far. We don't have anyone from Barnstable, Bourne, Brewster, Falmouth, Orleans, Provincetown, or Wellfleet.
We have a volunteer from Falmouth, a selectman, Melissa Furtok.
Good, because we've got Len Sussman from Chatham, Wayne Bergeron, Mark McDonald, Ed McManus, Mike Richardson, Kurt Hartman, and Suzanne McCullough. Yeah, it's a real sort of power group. So I'm looking forward to this policy group and their involvement in this process. We are also putting together a scientific advisory panel, and so they're coming in. We've got some people from USGS and some of the state agencies, federal agencies that are going to help us coordinate on this. And then we will be putting together a stakeholders committee. We also last week wrote to the Massachusetts Ocean Partnership, which is a group that sort of helped the state put together its plan. But it's a non-profit group, but we've received a lot of money in order to support these efforts. We wrote a grant to them last week for $370,000 to support some of the efforts around that. That would allow us to do a fairly in-depth community survey along the levels of what our second homeowner survey was, but this would be about sort of offshore renewables and allow us to give some stipends to some of the scientific advisory committee members. And so that's a fairly large grant that I think MOP is going to take up next week. So that...
I'm sorry, what does that acronym stand for?
MOP stands for the Mass Ocean Partnership.
Okay, and they're, are they in a position to give you this kind of money?
Yeah. I think they had, at one point, they had several million, it was over $5 million in order to support the effort of ocean planning. They got that, I think it was a national grant that they received because we were one of the...
So they're a conduit for federal money, and we're applying.
I think it's private money.
Is it private money?
Yeah. I think it came from a private foundation. I don't think it was a federal grant.
So it went to the state?
But it didn't go to the state. It went to the MOP is actually a non-profit organization that supports sort of ocean research.
Got it.
Now, how might you be recruiting for this scientific advisory panel?
Well, we've been taking suggestions, from anybody who would have suggestions from people that might want to participate. Some of them are we want USGS involved. We want DEP involved, and some of the state people that were on the state plan. So we've had a good response to date. Some of the response has been trickling in because some of the experts we've targeted are actually busy in the Gulf right now. But gets into this. It's going to be a very exciting process of thinking about what we're going to do out there in state waters.
What about NOAA or Woods Hole or people?
They're all on the list.
Okay.
They're all on the list.
Coastal studies?
Yes.
Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, yeah. They're on the list. So, so that's a fairly large grant on the Ocean DCPC. So the first meeting right now is still scheduled for July 13th. That would be the first meeting of the policy committee. But we still have some members that are outliers, and so we have to be confident that we're going to get enough people there. We may move that a little bit. And then we'll put together the stakeholders.
These outliers that you mentioned, will they be there at this meeting, or are they still out? Out of the picture?
We're following up by phone as we speak to make sure that we have representation from all the towns. I mean, Bourne has less of an issue; they've got less involvement with the DCPC, but everybody else really should be taking this seriously.
I will get a letter to you on that appointment.
Good.
The board did appoint her.
Yeah, and I think that's where we are with probably 5 of the remaining communities where there's been action taken. We just need to have it sort of come our way. So the Ocean DCPC will be moving forward. The other thing that you'll see moving on is the Regional Wastewater Management Plan. We are going to be approaching that differently. We're going to break the Cape down by the 46 identified nitrogen impaired watersheds. And so we're going to have watershed by watershed meetings rather than going town by town to try to get the point that this is more than a municipal experience.
Yeah, I think that was that came out of the last iteration of looking at the wastewater management planning activity, and it was also part of the advice that I think that we gave to the Wastewater Collaborative Committee.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's got to be a watershed approach. But this is the first sort of embodiment of that approach, where we're actually going to notify people watershed by watershed, pick meeting places in the watersheds, and bring people out to talk about watershed issues.
Okay. There's one piece of this that's very important to me, and that's there are 2 towns, I believe, on the Cape that do not have watersheds within their boundaries, but they are in the net zone of contribution to those watersheds. I believe one of them is Sandwich.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
right.
and it's important that at some level that they are engaged and involved.
They are, and they will be.
Sandwiches, yeah.
And actually, Barnstable has put together a Citizens Advisory Committee, a CAC, and really for the first time has reached out to both Yarmouth, Sandwich, and Mashpee to have members included on their towns. So I think that's a step in the right direction.
Yes.
So we'll be continuing those efforts and trying to meet on a watershed basis, which I think will be a new approach for us. And it could require anywhere from 46 to 12 meetings, but we'd like to have this work done by November.
I've been attending the Wastewater Comprehensive Review Committee meetings and found them very interesting. And last night, and there has always been someone there from Sandwich, and Tom Fudala was there from Mashpee last night. And it was a very interesting exchange of information. And you're absolutely right about the watersheds, because we talked about Wacoit Bay, part of which is in Mashpee, and he referred a lot to the Papaneset watershed and the New Seabury and all the different systems that Mashpee has that are privately owned and not publicly owned, like Mashpee Commons and the Roche Brothers and all. It was really pretty amazing. And when you hear from other communities like that, I think it's much better than doing it town by town, because it lets people realize that it isn't just their own town, that they have to look at the watersheds. So, I'm still looking for a person to represent Falmouth on that would be a selectman. And if the one person that I hope doesn't, it might be me.
Well, I think part of the inspiration for the meetings in the watershed actually came from Falmouth Sewer Socials.
Sewer Socials.
I mean, those are the kind of discussions that we need to have in order to make sure that the public is aware of what's going on and aware of really the regional efforts to keep the cost as low as possible. Mm-hmm. Effective and efficient solutions are what we're looking for, without prescribing any particular method.
Well, but Tom Fudala really talked about the public education and the outreach, and as you know, in Falmouth, we're using the Consensus Building Institute to do some of that, because it's much better than having someone like a former town manager lead a meeting, because people get their mindsets about certain individuals, or a former selectman. You get someone from the CBI, and they're so neutral, and plus they're so skilled at doing it. And I can't wait for the July 8th meeting to really see how the public is going to respond to that kind of a, and that's going to be all on finances. So that should be really interesting.
When is that?
July 8th.
There's another issue, perhaps it's anecdotal, but I've been in conversation with two town councilors in Barnstable with regard to this issue in a general way, and it turns out one of them is an inspector and the other one is an installer, operator. And I think you know what I'm talking about. So I hope that that at some point that you anticipate what might be some of their issues, and that, I think that would facilitate.
I talk to those same two individuals a lot. The problem, there is that some communities like to come to the table and talk about regional issues, and some resist. And Barnstable's not alone in sort of their isolation. But I see very encouraging signs from their CAC and some of the sort of financial discussions that they're having now, and they're finally addressing some of the issues that really should have been addressed, a decade ago. But it's all about moving forward at this point.
And both of them, by the way, are open to supporting anything that can be defended, from a technical point of view. And
yeah,
the great concern is that that we do the homework to make sure that the technical piece fully evaluates the need and the let's say and the anticipated growth or no growth in the area that we're recommending.
And I think we can do. I mean, what disturbs me most about the wastewater discussion over the last year is this: our groups out there that have been painting regional efforts as big pipe solutions, like we already know what we want to do and how we want to solve this thing, and that is just patently untrue. And the only thing the only principles guiding these discussions in the watersheds are: this is the nature of the problem. These are the causes. This is the nature of the problem. We need to figure out the least expensive way to meet TMDLs, and that's it. And I don't. If someone comes up with something that works, that we can permit, then let's use it.
But the other interesting thing that people are looking at too is Tom Fudalo talked about it last night, that the first thing you have to find out is where you're going to discharge this water. Yeah. If you're going to pump it in some fashion. Yeah. Where's it going to go? And that's a huge problem. And he said until you really find out where the water's going to go, it's hard to know what system is going to work best.
Yeah. So whenever you are collecting water, you have to discharge.
Right.
And if you're collecting water in a watershed where you have to remove 100% of the nitrogen, then by definition you can't discharge in that watershed. So now you've got to move it. And so now you have transport costs associated with moving it, and you also have potential hydrological consequences too. So it's not an easy thing, but it's not rocket science either. And I think that those watersheds where 100% removal is required, or right now it looks like Chatham and Falmouth and Mashpee are quite it's sort of an issue down there. But
now the other issue that came up again last night at this meeting was the letter that we received from Orleans, Orleans Selectmen, about doing another peer review. Now Falmouth is doing its own peer review, but not of the science of the plan.
Right.
But they brought it up last night because I think we had a letter from the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen supporting the Orleans Board of Selectmen in asking for this peer review. Have we heard from any other town? But I think that we're going to have to address it, I think, in some way. We did send the letter back saying that no, we did not believe that this is what we needed to do at this time. So, but I think we have to, before other towns decide that maybe they ought to jump on this bandwagon of having the peer review of the science, that maybe we need to address it a little more formally.
Well, it's an understandable concern. I thought the response by the commissioners was a good one. It's an understandable concern, but really we've been through this a lot, and the state has been through it, and other independent people have looked at the methodology. And we know that it's directionally correct. Is any sort of algorithm going to be adjustable by 5 or 10% one way or another? Probably. But we know that this is directionally correct. And this is a very precarious position that we're in now, because we are drawing closer, I think, to potential legal action based on the TMDLs that were established. And so, I think towns are in an interesting
legal
position.
Action from what organization?
It would be from a non-governmental organization. That's what there's no town that's going to sue themselves or anybody else that I know of, and there are no other governmental agencies that are involved. But there are other environmental organizations out there that are very interested in establishing under the Clean Water Act a cause of action for pollution from non-point sources. The Cape is right for that.
If I can just add, I was being in Wolfley, I'm talking to friends and neighbors and people who have been doing the testing on the various bodies of water down there for years, and they also express concern. Now, they didn't get their town to actually write a letter, but they are people who are very knowledgeable and very invested in a positive outcome. But a lot of it seemed to just question, where are the numbers coming from? What's the motivation behind the numbers? I mean, it's sort of like a little mistrust of some of the sources. So,
what does that mean? Does that mean that they are supporting an additional peer review?
Well, they do question it. So I was
Questioning what?
They were supporting it. They were basically in support of the letter from Orleans.
Okay. Is this from the Board of Selectmen?
No, this is general people. These are people who are on the ground doing the work and have had this interest for years.
Were they able to report that they actually read the report from Orleans?
Yes, I believe that they did. So yeah, they said, you're going to get have you received a letter? So
Yeah, it's understandable, but Orleans
Right.
just appropriated $500,000 to begin their study, and my experience tells me every time a community begins,
Right.
they start with questioning the science. That's appropriate. That's an appropriate place to start.
Right.
And the questions that they raise have to be answered. But they have been answered.
Yes.
Right.
And I think that was the motivation for us writing the letter.
That's exactly right.
So we have to
but we
continue to
have to
provide-
keep
So
So
answering.
now that we've answered the letter, I think the legal response is asked and answered.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, but-
in this particular instance, so I hope that you told the people in Wellfleet that.
I did, and I did feel that it was worthy of, I spoke to Andy about this, and I even mentioned it to you briefly, that, we would be happy to go down and clarify, just to kind of hash that, just to make them feel more comfortable, because those people actually, if they, there's legitimacy in their words because of their involvement and their concern and desire for a positive outcome. So
Maybe we look at their credentials as far as what's the basis of their concern.
Well, we're not going to make it like we're pulling out our resumes.
No, I mean because
No.
I've heard a lot of well-intentioned, but unexperienced or educated people that make engineering judgments based upon the fact that they've been involved in something for a long period of time, and to me, I'm very concerned about that. I mean,
Right.
the disciplines that I was trained and raised in suggest that you look at the baseline of what the qualifications are of the people that are asking the questions, so that when you respond to them, it's on the basis of a level of understanding that they can have.
They're enough that I respect their concern, and I do just think it's worthy of listening to.
Those-
The response, every time there's an issue like that, the response should be that you send Andy
Right.
and
Yeah.
me or anyone else down there. And really, I believe it's the duty of any public servant. You've got to answer
agree.
those questions as often as they are asked, and
Well-
as patiently as possible.
Now,
But-
the TMDLs, they were based on build-out,
yes.
I believe. So one of the things that came up last night in the discussion was, well, okay, so you have these TMDLs established for here. And let's say that there's a parcel of land that, and it's also based on the zoning, I think, of all the land mass that the TMDLs represent. But suppose the zoning changes and now somebody, or the zoning doesn't change, but somebody builds a big 40B development in there. That really can change everything. So to get so detailed and worried about the TMDLs, I mean, things like that could affect
Yeah.
a watershed.
Well, I would pose this to critics. As we were sort of approaching this without TMDLs and without the Manifest Tourist Project, DEP had a different attitude when they were thinking about potential enforcement down the road, and they were going to require their modus operandi. I would suggest that they were going to favor a one-size-fits-all approach that was going to be heavy on pipes, and therefore extraordinarily expensive for a community that was rural and didn't have existing infrastructure. The MEP project, because of the detailed nature of the build-outs, allowed specific TMDLs that will allow us to build smaller systems. So the MEP project itself could save, tens of millions, if not $100 million, for the Cape. That's why those TMDLs are important. They're going to allow us more flexibility to build less than a one-size-fits-all approach that you can see coming from the state in other respects. So there's a certain irony to the complaint about the science and the fact that they think that the science is supporting a big pipe solution that's going to cost taxpayers a lot of money. In fact, I think the MEP project suggests just the opposite.
The science that's involved in this does not suggest one solution.
No.
It suggests a
No.
group of integrated
That's right.
solutions
It
that
identifies
apply.
the problem.
Yeah.
And it sets a very specific level that needs to, is a scientific level for total maximum daily loads that should address the problem. Now that's exactly the kind of information you want if you're going to build a system that is responsible to your tax base. And so that's part of the message I think we have to continue to get out there. And
That's a really good point, I
Yes.
think. It really is.
yeah,
We've been saying from the beginning of this, from several years ago, that we were never supporting an idea of running a pipe down Route 6 and having one massive sewer treatment plant. It was always about appropriate applications on a decentralized but sub-regional basis that would address local problems. And in each case, it would come after an appropriate technical evaluation of what was needed in order to address and provide a solution that would be both effective and to the greatest degree possible low cost.
And the other thing I would bring up is the state has invested millions of dollars in the Mass Estuaries project. The county has invested millions of dollars in wastewater, and none of that came out of the town coffers. And it was an appropriate use of that money in order to get a scientific baseline that would allow us to build as little infrastructure as possible. The other piece I would bring up is that the planning horizons for these solutions are 20 or 30 years out. In every one of those, as we did in Chatham, we are looking at adaptive management. So now that we have the TMDL, we can measure the TMDL. If for some reason it's not working, we can change the approach. And so so it's not as inflexible as people think that it is.
The only thing that's inflexible is the goal of leaving the groundwater cleaner than it was and maintain the sustainability of that cleanliness throughout some foreseeable future.
A lot of people lose sight of is when they think everybody's going to be sewage. 60% of the Cape is going to remain on Title V systems. 12, 13% of the Cape is already on centralized collection or sewer systems. So we just have to close the gap in the middle. It's not necessarily as radical as people think, and there are other advantages to the economy and to the environment from these sort of wastewater solutions. But they have to be done in a way that's responsible to the taxpayer. And I think the county has always had that first, and the commission has always had that first and foremost in our review of these things.
Absolutely.
Can I ask, what is Barnstable? I know that they've moved forward on this and they're proposing, are they going back to a betterment again, or what is it that they're...
Are they discussing that tomorrow night, I think?
Yeah.
There's a proposal up there should be a betterment on some level. The question is what percentage.
Right.
Barnstable, prior to this, had a 100% betterment policy.
Exactly.
Which was just
Well, actually, they say that they never had 100%
Oh, they
betterment
did.
policy.
No, they did.
Did
They
they?
did.
Yeah, they did.
It's a
It's
one
not-
council.
That's why that went
No, they
down
always did, and actually
in flames.
that's the way that they've done it for a long time. But you have to understand that policy started, decades ago when they have the biggest wastewater treatment plant on the Cape now. Was built when the federal government paid 95% of the capital construction costs. The state kicked in an additional 3%. So that didn't come off the backs of the taxpayers. So it was easy to charge somebody 100% betterment back there. Construction costs were lower. Didn't cost a lot.
Right.
It made more sense. Over time, it makes a lot less sense, especially if you have a very specific project and it's potentially over-engineered. Those costs get astronomical now, where you are in effect doubling somebody's tax rate. And especially in a betterment, because a betterment, unlike property tax, can't be claimed as an exemption in federal income tax. So they, I think, are approaching something where it's a 50% betterment. Now, that seems to make sense. And then they're looking for an override. Is it a debt exclusion or an override?
It's an override.
Yeah, I think it's an override. And they're also looking at doing the rooms and meals tax and associating that income to
Okay. In this instance, you're speaking as a citizen of Barnstable and not speaking for us as county commissioners,
No,
right?
I'm just telling you what the proposal
Right,
is.
and there is some concern among the businesses that they're being double hit because of the meals and tax, and then their own taxes that they would have to pay on this, so there's a concern there, so I know that will
there's-
come up.
Yeah, I mean, any time you're going to use the rooms and meals tax, you're going to look at this, and then, what you're going to have, just as some people are questioning the science, some people are questioning in all other towns, well, where was the town a decade ago?
Right.
How come you weren't like Chatham when you were retiring debt service? How come you didn't build up a cushion so that you could finance this without having to go for an override?
Right.
And they're going to say, why didn't you have the forethought in the town to do that? Instead, you waited, and now you're shifting the cost onto the business community. So that's the argument that you'll hear.
Can I ask, I mean, in the town administrators' meetings, that Bill Hinchy attends? No, not regularly. No, because I was just wondering, I mean, this conversation must have come up more than once over the last 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
People were going to
frequently, yeah.
But it was
They're in a
never...
tough spot. And, not every town's Chatham. I mean,
Right.
Only 30% of Chatham's
Exactly.
general fund goes to support schools,
Right.
unlike Sandwich that has a 70%.
70%, right.
So it's a very different from town to town. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why towns either did or didn't. Didn't have as much foresight as Chatham in that.
Yeah, and on the other Cape, it's not as extreme.
Well, the
in
nature of the
issue.
wastewater disposal issues changes once you get sort of north of southeast town. It's different. You got different priorities up there. You got a lot less density.
Right.
You're going to have to look at different kinds of technologies in order to sort of take care of that. I mean, the question of which method of disposal you're going to use really, I think, surrounds density. It's got to, because that again gets to cost effectiveness. The more people you have on the shortest amount of pipe, the more sustainable that system's going to be from a financial perspective.
Can I ask another question? Patty, how is, speaking of waste, how's the solid waste? How's that?
Solid waste is good. I was actually just at CMAS yesterday, but we've got the scope drafted for hiring an attorney to help us look at creating refuse or waste management districts and putting together an RFP that would go out in the next calendar year that would ask companies like CMAS or the Town of Warren Landfill Enterprise Unit to give us proposals about how they would dispose of our municipal waste. And I think I've really seen the towns turn a corner in looking at this waste as an asset instead of a problem. And that's the first step towards getting toward a zero waste solution for the region, which is really exciting, I think.
It would be very exciting.
So I am starting to, I was asked to hold off on my kind of round of visits to the selectmen until after the elections. So Carrie Cahoon is in the process of setting up a series of meetings. And I'll meet with the local DPW director, facility operator, and go in and do a really abbreviated presentation at the CDM PowerPoint and let them know where we're moving ahead with this development of an RFP going forward. So we should have an RFP we can put out on the street, after January of 11, which gives us a year to get to town meeting by 2012, if any good solutions kind of pop out.
What is being, I mean, what are the options? And just quickly, like they're...
The options, one is to form a district, and potentially that could be a district that is hosted in Bourne at the landfill. I think Bourne selectmen and Board of Health have been meeting much more regularly lately to try and decide what they want to do with that facility, but it's my hope that they would respond to an RFP with an exciting solution that includes not just landfilling, but other methods of dealing with the waste stream.
Right.
Another option is to have this lawyer that we'll work with over this year develop some contract terms that all of the Cape towns can sign on to. So hopefully, if we don't form a district, we would negotiate together in a single contract setting. So that's another option, and that's probably the second most likely to come out. CMAS has just started a recycling initiative that they're going to be announcing Friday. And I believe that at least the purpose of the meeting is public, which is to discuss a deal they've made with a recycling company in Weymouth, and they are looking to collect Cape recyclables and bring them off Cape for processing. And they'll be unveiling the details of that on Friday. And I mentioned to them also that Elaine Davis has been putting together countywide procurement around recyclables. So
Great. That's good.
It was CMAS also, that's also Covanta, right?
That's
Yeah.
Covanta.
Covanta, right.
Now, would those recyclables bring revenue back to the Cape? No, or would it be more of the waistline and the...
I'm not familiar with the details of what CMAS is going to offer yet, and I'm hoping they're going to make some of those details available on Friday.
But some of it depends on the market.
Yeah.
Recyclables,
Yeah.
which is really below
The reason
market
I
rate.
mention it is I've been getting calls like unbelievably about the waste facility in town. I had a call the other day from somebody who lives in Wellesley. And, they're all giving me, these are all people who are seasonal, who tell you the way it works in their community and why we should do
Works
that.
wonderfully in Wellesley.
Well, they have no curbside, and we should do away with curbside. Just tell me what this guy said. And the recyclables, the town makes so much money on recyclables because they're worth so much. So that's why
I don't think they are.
I think
Yeah,
a
you don't
potential
think they are.
benefit of an offer like this, or you talk to some of the outer Cape towns, is just that you get a standard price for the stuff. So as the market goes up and down, at least you can be assured that for your budget purposes, you're either not paying out a lot, or even though you're not getting a lot back,
Curbside pickup is less expensive,
and that there's a higher recycling rate.
and there's a higher recycling rate associated
Yeah,
with
but
it.
I believe that's true.
And the towns that are collecting a lot of recyclables now are getting below market rates. Sometimes I think they're just combined and burned.
Right.
So
Yeah,
they're
there is to keep
you're
stuff out of
separating
waste
them
stream.
only to have them be combined and burned at the end. It's just crazy.
Now, the other thing East Milton does is they encourage the recycling so that you're only given one trash can, but many recycling boxes. So if you go over your trash, you have to pay extra per trash can. And, my friend, I think you've even met Mary, she said it's amazing how you can really reduce your trash when you're thoughtful about it by separating all the packaging. I mean, it's work, but it's well worth it, and it all goes to its proper destinations. And
I think as the cost of disposal goes up per ton, towns are really going to need to consider curbside or pay-as-you-throw or other ways of encouraging residents to start separating.
Yeah, pay as you throw is the new big one now. Everybody's doing that. And single stream recycling is now the big thing. That's what
Which is great.
they're doing in my neck of the woods. Everybody's doing
what is
that.
single
Really?
stream?
You just get one big
Setting up
green,
bin.
40 or whatever
Oh,
gallon
what do you
thing,
call it?
and you put your paper and your
Single stream.
cans and your plastic, everything goes in the same thing.
And they
Combined.
sort it
But,
away.
They combine, they pick it
Yeah,
up with
combined,
the
it's
arm thing, and boom, wherever it goes,
It's incredibly
knows?
convenient, but
it's convenient.
you will
Well,
hear
that's what we have, that kind of recycling.
Out of sight, out of
Right.
mind.
you will hear people say though that it's problematic for the end markets.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Right, I would imagine.
creates some
Yeah.
concern.
Yeah.
But I know now in Falmouth that we used to have the little plastic boxes, but now you can just put a sticker on any kind of
Oh, that makes sense.
what do I want to say?
Yeah, garbage.
A container,
Right.
yeah, a garbage container, and put recycle on it. You put all your recyclables in there, and they know enough to put those on the right truck.
That makes sense.
I have a question just for clarification. Like in Harwich, the recyclables all go to a particular area, and they basically accumulated and sold. The paper goes into a roll-off and so forth. I presume they're doing it on an independent basis. Is this proposed to replace? Are they proposing to replace what like the town, like Harwich is doing?
They will make an offer to the towns and say, we will pay you X amount of dollars for your fiber and commingled glass and cans or whatever it is.
Okay.
We don't know what that offer is yet, so depending on what the towns are doing now, how far they are into their contracts, it may be a town-by-town decision at this point.
Okay.
I asked them yesterday, and they said they're looking for a 2 to 3 year agreement with the community if they sign on. That's good.
And then just on the SEDS front, we had our update last month. The Senate President came down. We reported annually after our first year, although I don't even think it's been a year since it's been adopted yet. And we're moving forward. Open Cape has come through. They've landed. They'll be housed over at the Cape Cod Commission until the building is done up there.
That's all been taken care of, all
They're
of that
working-
communication.
Yeah, I know Bob Troy and Mike Scott have been in communication, and they're working on drafting some
So-
language.
So
So they're
that's,
housed over there?
yeah, so
Okay.
that's exciting, but Open Cape's only going to lay out sort of the fiber highway there. The data that sits on top of this and what's used is yet to be determined. One of the issues that I would like to put some effort into is looking at a lot of the water quality information that's collected Cape-wide. And this would get to some of the criticism, I think, about the MEP and the lack of availability of that data to people to sort of swim around in it on their
Is
own.
that connected to Open Cape?
I think it could be, because I think what we could have is give a regional information center where we take all of the Cape Cod Bay information collected by the Province for Center Coastal Studies, and the Sound Keepers have Nantucket Sound information. Buzzards Bay has information over there. We have our PALS program, Ponds Lake Stewardship Program, Cape Keepers, and then some of this MEP data. If we could pull this all together in one place, and then design algorithms to allow us to use it, then wherever water is on the Cape, we should have an indication of what the quality of that water is, which would be very beneficial for the Commission, because the water is the basis of who we are. So our planning decisions should start with, okay, well, how's the water? But we've also had some discussions with representatives from HUI and MBL2 who are very excited about the possibility of using this data for economic development to usually, if it were there, they could develop new technologies, smarter water technologies associated with that. So I think it has both an environmental protection benefit and an economic development benefit to create this database.
Well, I guess what's confusing me is that I looked at Open Cape as being a communication linkage and a means or a highway to transmit information. I had not connected it with a storage.
You know, they're going to have a big storage facility up there,
yeah.
but they're not going to control the content, and this is the whole issue.
Okay.
So we have to decide regionally whether we want a regional information center and what kind of content is going to be there. It could be that we could have a water quality component. We could have regionalized assessing as a component of that. We could have all our economic development data up there and available. But that kind of high-speed availability, transparency of that information, I think is cutting edge. It's really going to be what's going to put this region and this county government ahead of other places. So we need to give some thought to how we're going to design this, and at least on the water quality issue, because I think if that information were available, then those people in Wellfleet or in Orleans that had some question would have access to that data to really look at the raw numbers, and then, okay, if you want to comment on it from there, at least we're using the same data sets that are available.
Yeah. And what has been the resistance of these entities really sharing? Because
There's no
they're all-
resistance.
There really isn't. It's just that no one's really pulled it together. It's not that there's ownership of
What you have different
property.
organizations that are all strapped for funding. And so they're all out there raising money on their own. So they don't necessarily talk to each other as much as they want to. The economic downturn, the withdrawal of some of the federal and state support of some of these agencies has forced them to collaborate. So Rich Delaney's done a great job with Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies in putting these monitoring agencies together. I think we could partner with him to get a lot of this data. I think we have some data with the Ponds Lake Stewardship Program that we would want to put in there. I think this would be a fantastic thing
I do too.
to take a look at. So I think we will be investigating a grant proposal where we'd look for a private company to come in and match one for one.
I had lunch
Some
with
availability.
Sharon Nunes
Yeah.
and Art Gaylord and actually Teresa Martin last week, and we were just kind of talking about, because Sharon's moving permanently, I think, to Falmouth. Her husband's retiring, and so she's going to be there all the time. So naturally, she wants to get more involved, and she's looking at the town she lives in, with the oceanographic and all that. But we were talking about the Open Cape and exactly.
What this woman is.
Oh, Sharon Nunes is the vice president of IBM.
Right.
And for the Big Green Initiatives program. And she was talking about that kind of monitoring, and that IBM is doing that all around the world.
Yeah,
In Ireland, in Haifa, in South Korea, they're doing some economic development. You probably know more about it than I do.
We would expect that those would be the kind of people that would respond to a grant opportunity like this. It would be IBM, Cisco, a couple of the other companies. They all have programs that look at this availability, but would really put the Cape on the map if we could partner with an organization like that to build a regional information center and look at some sort of smart designation for the region.
Right.
So there's a piece to this that, that to me is very important, is that as important as it is to
Planet
collect and store, The other piece is the reduction piece.
Yes.
Okay, because it always seems to me that, you have piles of information, but there doesn't seem to be a path to get it reduced to a point where it could be, let's say, appropriately applied.
Right.
And I hope as you look at this RFP that,
Yeah,
that's a component.
that's
that will be
always
part
been
of
a
that.
concern of mine too, Bill, is that you need sort of a dashboard that people can understand and some indicators that are going to come up so they can measure this. And then you can have the real sort of scientists can, drill down into the specifics of the information, but it's got to be transparent and available to the average citizen too in order for this to have value.
Right.
So that's what we're looking at, sort of putting together an RFP to go out with that, because we received an EDA planning grant for $60,000.
Congratulations, that
Thank
was
you.
great. Good
So
news.
with and the Fisheries Partnership Trust is a $2 million EDA program that's out there. We're closing on that. I think that we've got some good signs, but we're still waiting for that to come through. But with Open Cape as a SEDS program, the Fisheries Partnership Trust as a SEDS program, and our SEDS planning grant, already within a year of partnering with the County Economic Development Council, we've been able to take that 350 and leverage it into some really big regional projects. And the 60 grand will allow us, I think, to take the next step on this regional information center too, which will be helpful.
Is this the designation of
There is,
being an
yeah.
economic,
Part
or
of it
is this a step towards it?
This is the 60,000 that will support our moving towards a designation as an economic development district, which will
right.
bring money in every year
annually,
directly
right.
from the feds
Right.
to support economic development planning on the
Okay.
Cape. Serpent gets it now. They get about 60 grand a year. I think that's why the grant was in about
Right.
that amount.
Right.
So the partnership with EDA is paying off. The partnership with the EDC is paying off. And we are leveraging, we're doing more with less. We're leveraging more outside funds in a way that I think is sustainable long term.
Okay, are you reporting this back to the EDC?
Yes.
There is one other question, and as wonderful as all of this is, there are 16 items in the
Yes.
SEDS. What are we doing about the others?
I could come back and go through all 16 if you want. I mean, we swapped out a couple of them, and we are doing, at the commission, we have ownership of several. One of those is coastal development studies plan. We've done a lot of work on, very map-based. It's a good presentation on its own. But I love it because we're talking about getting more economic development activity from our working harbors, as well as less development activity in those more sensitive coastal areas. So it shows the balance that I think has been lacking in the discussion about how environmental protection and economic development are not inconsistent with one another when you have a comprehensive plan that supports that. That's one of them. There's also this roundtable is the lead agency on looking at regional redevelopment opportunities. This has been, David Willard and I have been working with local chambers and EDICs, working with Falmouth and Mashpee EDIC, and we're working with some of the lower Outer Cape chambers to look at ways that we can regionalize their efforts. And I think the county EDC, the Cape Cod Commission, the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce are working pretty well together now because we've established roles and responsibilities for one another and there aren't any turf issues. I think we need to have that local discussion about how the local chambers and what role they're going to play. I absolutely need EDICs. I need those local chambers in order to be successful in these economic centers that are part of the land use vision maps. And so we're working with them now to help them coordinate and find certain efficiencies and hopefully become more sustainable as entities going forward.
And if I can add to that, it's just reminded me, I did meet with the local EDICs, or the local chambers, the LC3, and it was shortly after they came, I think it was 2 days, it was within the week that they came to the EDC meeting and just sat in and introduced themselves. They would very much like to have a representative from their organization at the EDC. Now, we said that you are welcome. It's a public open meeting, so they can attend any time. But they would like to be able to, I guess now all of the positions have been, there was some openings there, but they would like to be a part of that, just to be aware of what is going on in the large area on a regional basis, and how they could participate, assist, or and just be able to make sure that they're aware of these initiatives so that they can promote them in their own local chambers.
Very specifically, we have Mashpee and and Falmouth Mashpee has a brand spanking new EDIC, and Falmouth probably has the most mature one on the Cape. And they've come together to talk about regional EDIC. And it's great because they're flip sides of the same coin, where Falmouth is sort of doesn't have a lot of land left to develop in the industrial parks, and that's how they sort of generated their revenue. So where are they going to be? Mashpee is just starting out, needs to do that. So there's a lot of synergy there. We should sort of help fund that effort going forward, and then help Falmouth EDIC evolve into what comes next. Maybe it's a bid on Main Street. Maybe it's part of this SEDS project, which has this regional redevelopment aspect to it, where there's a potential economy of scale on the financing of some of these economic development activities that's better at a regional level. And maybe we could, through special legislation, set up some authorities that would energize these local chambers, local EDICs, where there would be certain regional capacity on the financing side, and then local geographically specific areas could opt into that, but be controlled by local boards. I mean, it's sort of a game-changing discussion, but it's a SEDS project.
Sandwich, by the way, Sandwich Chamber of Commerce is looking for a sign on Route 6 to direct people to the visitor center, which they hope to, the one that's in front of the landfill. Could you communicate that to Priscilla?
Yes, we're having some sign discussions with the state now on other mid-Cape issues. So.
Have you been reading about in this state of Massachusetts where other rest areas, I believe they're called rest areas, or maybe they're visitor centers, have been adding some
entertainment?
Not entertainment, but
that's a Gary Stubbs Memorial.
like farmers markets is one thing that they've been using them for, so that people driving by, would go to the visitor center and could also buy fresh, buy local. And we were always told that the state doesn't allow anything to any kind of operation at all that's involved in retail on their space.
They've been reluctant to add to the permit because you get the permit from the state.
Yeah.
Mass Highway.
Well, that's another discsion.
Well, they have boxes for collection of different things.
Now, I'm talking about...
I know the one on Route 3 has, several boxes of...
I know, but...
And outbuildings that, that are available to sort of the back.
I should
But
not even mention it.
but
Let's erase that. Erase that. Come up with another discussion.
We're going to get
Let's
silly
stick with
now.
what we have. Because...
The one thing that is on to close the SEDS discussion
Yes.
is we have our reset team that's
Yes.
out there working very aggressively in Yarmouth right now with getting some fantastic results, I think, working with the planning board and ultimately the Board of Selectmen down there. So we're engaged there. We just were awarded a $35,000 contract to work in East Harwich. So we'll begin the work there. We're working on the harbor down there too, and the loop sort of connecting Main Street and Harwich to Harwich Port. We have just begun work in West Chatham, and we are also working aggressively in Sandwich. The reset team will be going to Sandwich to look at sort of the issues around the triangle, and we're setting some of that up there, and then probably very aggressively with Bourne on the north side of the canal. There's a lot that's happening on the north side. That floating tech park is out there. There's a potential for an industrial park out there, but more impressively, there's a proposal to put 7 wind turbines out there, which I think is going to be a real project that we need to watch. But the connection of that proposal to the Buzzards Bay activity is also important. They've got a streetscape project worth about $700,000 that they are looking for from the state down there. They get a shovel in the ground, start moving some of that stuff around. And they've got a lot of different plans that are already done. So you'll see the reset team will be down there helping Bourne put that together, working on Bourne and Sandwich and Yarmouth and these other communities very aggressively in these economic centers. And as part of that, I want to close with one of the subjects that is near and dear to Bill and I, which are the bridges.
Yes.
There are a couple of big...
Shelby mentioned that
there are a couple
word.
of federal grants that are floating around right now. The Tiger 2 grant is out there. Mm-hmm. And we are scheduled as part of our UPWP, our work plan for the state to look at the canal area, the transportation study. And then the state sort of said that they were going to fund it at $50,000, but we haven't seen that yet, so don't know where that is. But now the Tiger 2 has planning money associated with it. You never see planning money on these federal transportation grants. So that our RFP issued yesterday,
And the NOFA.
The NOFA issue. So we're looking at that. We've already begun conversations with Bourne. We're looking to schedule a meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers, hopefully within a couple of weeks, to discuss applying for a planning grant that will look at that canal area and really let's deal with the big ticket. You know, what are we going to do with these bridges? Because we're looking at 3 potential rotary reconfigurations in Bourne, but until we know what the future output and egress and access over the canal is going to be, it makes it more difficult to redesign these roundabouts and rotaries.
Who's going to be representing the Cape Cod Commission at that meeting with the Corps of Engineers?
Me.
Okay.
And
let us know when that is.
When I know, I'll let you know too. And I've had preliminary conversations with Tom Kerr at the RTA.
Good.
So he will be involved in that discussion too.
Perfect.
But this is a really big opportunity on the Tiger II to handle that big issue. Those traffic concerns last year, I think, has highlighted for everyone how important those bridges are, and we need to start planning for the future on that. And it's vital to what's happening in Bourne, especially on the north side in Buzzards Bay and the Green Tech Park.
And at some point, we have to make sure that Bourne is aware that we are moving forward on this, so
Yes.
that they feel a certain level of partnership.
Met with
this.
Corinne Moore, who's the planner, yesterday. We'll be speaking with Tom Garino. Met with Sally Riggs, who heads the Bourne Financial Development Corporation, yesterday too. We'll be meeting with the Main Street Steering Committee, Buzzards Bay, on Monday, the 28th.
Right.
So engaged in Bourne. You've got 15 towns. You've got to look at the whole region and try to treat them all equally. But occasionally you see the stars line up in one place, and that's really where you've got to focus your
Bourne
attention.
is the doorway to Cape Cod.
Yeah,
And
but the stars are lining up for them right now, and so we will put a great deal of attention on that matter, and hopefully be able to move that forward. The other federal grant that we expect to issue a NOFA within a couple of weeks is the feds are starting to make federal agencies work collaboratively in sending the money out too. Under the theory, like if you're going to rip up the road, you might as well do everything under the road at the same time. It's more efficient, it's going to save money. So HUD, EPA, and DOT are collaborating on sort of this community catalytic
Sustainability.
Yes, catalytic investment fund for economic center kind of issues. So there's planning money associated with that too. There's a really big chunk from HUD that has some planning money associated. And it's really sort of a transit-oriented development on steroids from the feds. And so I think there are 2 places on the Cape that could be very competitive for that. I think Hyannis is one, I think Buzzards Bay is the other. So we continue to look at the potential to be competitive in the process, putting these comprehensive, coordinated economic centers together.
I'm really delighted to hear these things, because it suggests that Secretary LaHood, who has made these promises in public, is keeping his word, and we're starting to see some of this stuff here.
Well, at the APA conference in New Orleans, there were people from the White House there, and they were talking about this, and I don't think they really know how they're going to do it yet, but they know that they're being told to do it. And I think the advantage for us is, I think, sometimes you go to these national conferences and you think you're going to be blown away by what they're doing in California, Colorado, or Santa Fe, or someplace like that. Most of the times I come back understanding that we're on the leading edge of a lot of this stuff.
As do I.
Yes.
That's very important for us, for people out here to remember
Yeah.
that we are being listened to, and we're seeing some effect of what we're trying to do to lobby for our benefits.
But in this White House initiative to consolidate these grants, I think, again, we're on the leading edge. And not having a lot of rules out there could be a good thing, because it will allow us to wow them with, under the premise that maybe they don't know exactly what they are looking for, but when they see it, they'll know what it is. And I think we can show that to them. On the other hand, it could be like Tiger One, which went to, all urban centers, mainly rail projects, and in strategic states. And
Ohio was mentioned. Right?
So we weren't necessarily as competitive on Tiger One as we could have been. But they in New Orleans mentioned that Tiger Two would try to accommodate some of those areas that were not served by Tiger One. Right. So.
And what's the source of Tiger II? Department of Defense?
Department of Transportation.
Transportation.
DOT, and LaHood is the Secretary of DOT.
I believe the capital, we're just talking about the planning money, because in order to be competitive for the capital money, again, you have to have shovel-ready projects. And I think they're talking about just billions of dollars
Yes, they are.
nationwide. It's just an incredible amount of,
But this is something that's needed to be addressed for a long time.
yeah, but I lament the fact that, you know, in the transportation world, it's always easier to get the big money for the capital projects than it is to get the small money for the planning and design.
Well, they're showing some intelligence finally.
Yeah, yeah. Except if we had had the planning and design done on the bridges, we would have been super competitive for the capital costs
Right.
associated with that replacement right now. And it's just, you know, it's
Well,
important to get
the
these.
complication was that the Corps of Engineers didn't have any motivation or interest in doing anything other than maintaining repairs and let's say low-level maintenance
Yeah.
until they did the paving project. And at that time, the question of replacement should have come up. Those bridges are 75 years old.
Right. And the Corps is strapped, as are many of the other federal agencies on the operating side, and on some of their own individual capital budgets. But they did the repairs now as part of the stimulus program. So I'm hoping that they'll be open to discussing some of these larger projects and get these things designed based on
Jobs for
experience.
planners are jobs.
Right.
Jobs for engineers are jobs.
So are you looking at like a third bridge, like a bridge beside it, like in Delaware? There's those.
You know, I think we are so
Memorial
preliminary
Bridge.
that any to prejudge any sort of specific design, I think, would be irresponsible.
Right.
But
There's always the tunnel.
you know, all of these things have merit, but I think ultimately you come back to what are the roadways that lead up to the canal, what are the roadways that lead
Right.
away from the canal.
Right.
And so that leads you to the vicinity of the existing structures. So
Right.
how are you going to reinforce them, make them better, substitute them where that's going to be? I'm not sure it's going to look radically different than it does not. Now, not to mention the bridges themselves are iconic as it relates to the Cape.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to see them taken down and replaced.
Well,
with
the
something.
architectonic definition of using negative space to use that iconic nature is certainly something that was evident in the report that was in the Cape Cod Times.
And you have to be careful because I remember when the Wilson Bridge was built in D.C. and the Beltway at that point was 3 lanes. I mean, they built the bridge with 2 lanes. And I mean, you can't have 3 lanes of traffic trying to get over
No.
a bridge
Someone
with
wasn't
2
planning.
lanes.
Well, you can't make
Truly, you have to wonder how those things
Make it
happen.
up.
No, but I think, you know, cantilevering options to the existing bridge, maybe using existing bridges for bike and ped or transit options, or
Oh, that's my
zipper
last
lanes, or any, if you can cantilever other sort of approaches, probably makes the
Yeah.
most sense and is the least expensive option. But,
All these have been brought up before,
Yeah.
but what we have to do is get somebody in the room that can actually respond to these questions and then take the next step.
right. But that's what we're going to do that whether we get the grant or not. We have to start that. So
Right.
discussions are going to begin beyond before.
Now, my last point that I want to bring up, isn't this Transportation Week or Bike Week or Lev and
Next week is Smart Transportation Week.
Okay.
Next week.
Next
Next
week.
And next Saturday, this Saturday, isn't there something with
There's
the
a bike thing
biking?
over the RTA.
26th.
It's over at the
Bike
RTA.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
26th.
The
Okay.
26th, it's a bike week
Oh,
rally in the
June
parking lot back
26th.
there.
Okay, so that's
Isn't that next Wednesday?
Yeah.
Yeah, next Wednesday
that's-
in June, I think.
Well, June 26th is Saturday.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And
There
they
is
have
a Saturday,
Is that
Clay's
at
going to
noontime?
unveil the bike plan that they've been working
Yeah,
on.
I've been
Yeah.
asked.
When is the
transportation?
The
It's
one
smart
here
transportation.
is on next Wednesday, but the bike thing at the RTA, is that in the morning or in the afternoon?
Don't know the time, I can email you.
Please do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
would you
I think
email me as well?
The
please?
press release
Might
on
as
that is
well make it
posted on
3.
our website as well as RTA's website. So we
Yeah.
coordinated that at a multimodal meeting last week.
Yeah, you mentioned
So-
that the bike thing's been going on, I mean, it's been announced for
Right.
a long time, and I know that, and I have it on my schedule for
Well,
Saturday.
they were here and my calendar got wiped and now it's coming back, so. Anything, I haven't received anything from,
From the commissioner's calendar, I haven't had anything this week. Since
Okay.
last week, I haven't had anything.
so maybe add those if you get them or.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I think as a matter of fact, I think I sent that to you, as far as what was on my schedule for Saturday.
Yes, you did. I got a copy.
Okay. No, did you just transfer the, no, I copied you on the email I sent in,
Yeah.
yeah.
I saw your email.
Are you working in
I gotta
the,
figure out something, I gotta figure out both.
Are we done? That was
lovely.
great. This has
Yeah.
really been good.
Oh, very
Most
nice.
informative. You all know so much about what's going on.
I should come back more often.
Really?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to have you come back because we wanted to
At
talk
least
about the
once a
LCA
month.
stuff.
Yeah, we also have to talk about the rest of the SEDS, as you suggested,
Right.
fill
At
us in
least
more.
once
So
a
when
month,
did you
because there's
schedule
so
that?
much
Yeah,
going
we
on
talked
your
about
end.
that. We talked
Even
about
if it were maybe for
You're gonna
a
probably
half
have to
hour
go
or
on.
something like that, it would keep us up to date on this. 'Cause-
Yeah, the DLTA scope on the assessors is getting ready.
Yeah.
So that should be out next week, and we've got 13 of the 15 towns that are interested. So that's a lot.
13 to
One of the
15.
things that a couple of assessors have spoken to me about is the importance of identifying the tipping point with regard to what makes sense in terms of what would be an appropriate accumulation or aggregation of towns and what would not.
Yeah. The a 14 or 13 town entity is probably too big. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've been working with the assessors on that, so they've been part of the process, and they've been very helpful.
Can you say what towns are not participating?
Yes.
Barnstable, Bourne was a maybe. Mashpee.
Not participating?
Not
We haven't heard from them yet.
Oh, you haven't?
Barnstable has their own plan, so I don't.
I
Oh.
think potentially Falmouth. It was the four big towns.
Yeah, I think Falmouth has some.
Yeah.
The bigger the towns, the more they want to sort of hang on to it themselves.
So
Again,
Falmouth's
that
not
that
interested?
addresses the tipping point.
I believe it.
of what makes
That's
sense.
what
Yeah, I mean,
it really
this is-
was, though.
There's going to be a certain economy of scale,
They're
clearly.
working.
But, you know, it was a little bit disappointing to have the lower outer Cape towns that really could benefit by a regionalized approach come to you and ask for help, have you approach the assembly, and have the big towns who didn't want that approach shoot it down.
Right,
I mean, so I'm just glad that we can answer
right.
the questions, which is all this study's going to do for some of these smaller towns.
Well, you're happy to know that the SEDS vote was unanimous with the Assembly,
Very good.
which I thought was great.
Amazing.
Yes.
You need the cement though.
What did I say?
This-
SEDS.
Oh, the
Yeah,
cement.
Sorry, cement, yeah.
Oh,
Cement.
right.
yeah.
As was their support of human services for change, which was really amazing as well.
Wow, they must all be up for election.
That's exactly the point that Julie Taylor made.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Both of you. Yeah, that was good.
Okay.
Bye, thank you. I'll call you
I'd like
if
to-
she's around.
I'd like to move
Yeah, are
the,
you-
I have
If you
just
have to go,
one
you're gonna have to
question.
go,
Yep.
probably.
12 shortly.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you a buzz.
Okay, thanks.
The contract with Elizabeth Hude.
I believe she's coming back to do some just transition stuff.
For
She
the
left.
commission or for us?
For
I
the
know.
commission,
Oh,
yeah.
for the commission.
How
Okay.
about, if she's going to be in the area, we should, if we get together an RFP for a strategic plan, as she did over there, to have a real discussion with, it
I
would be
think
great
this
to
is a
have her
pretty
do
short
that.
term.
I know
The
that
term
is, but it
in
would be a
there,
separate-
so I don't know how long.
It's
It would be a
first-
separate, but if she's in town, I would be very interested in seeking her out, if she would be interested in doing that on a consulting.
Yeah, all right, we'll find out. We can find out.
Because she did an excellent job, and especially with people who resisted it at first, but she spent a lot of time with each department head and members of the department, and, I think they all really felt a benefit.
All right, you were making
I
a
would make a
motion.
motion to approve.
Second.
1 through 28.
28, yeah.
Right.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. 3 in favor, motion carries. It's another thing you open meeting where you have to announce the vote.
Okay.
Approved 3.
No more secrets, huh?
All right.
No.
We talked about that last night at Housing, about, I pointed out that we could take reports from citizens, but we could not deliberate. And the question came up about maintaining documents, and they were in the, or Val was under the impression that we had to retain the documents, like the plans for housing, with the minutes. I said, no, you just have to reference them. So I
Right.
told her to
Yeah,
set that up.
just list them,
List them,
actually
yeah.
list them.
Right.
Mark, want to?
The only thing I have for you is I have a contract, and it's actually with Cape Cod Resort. It's a contract for human services because they are doing their client coordination council training on June 30th, 2010. So that's for you guys to sign, if I could give you that. And the only other thing I have are tour reminders, which are stuff that you're aware of, is this Friday at 1 o'clock is the band program graduation.
Right.
I feel like that you were going to try to go to that.
I'll be there. I think did you RSVP for me?
It doesn't require an RSVP, so you can actually take that if you want.
No, I have that. I have a copy of that.
I'll be done with that.
It's at the district courthouse.
That's at First District Court, yeah, at
Sorry,
1 o'clock.
I missed it. What was this?
I'm
The
sorry,
band,
that's,
right.
I'm just
Oh, the
reminding you of the
band,
band
district
program
courthouse.
graduation, Friday the 25th at 1 o'clock over at First District Court, if you're interested. And just remember, and this actually, there's a conflict, Sheila, for this. Thursday, July 22nd at 9 o'clock at the Tilden Arts Center is the AmeriCorps graduation.
Oh,
Sheila,
that's
that's
when the
also when the
chiefs-
chiefs are meeting. So you have to decide what you want to do on that one, on that day. And that's all I have. I do not have anything else.
Anything you want to say?
Well, I went to the Massachusetts Job Summit up in Sturbridge yesterday, and the governor addressed the workforce boards from across the state and was encouraging, mentioned that 15,000 jobs have been added, and then the luncheon speaker got up and said basically that it's not 9.5% unemployment in the state, is 21% if you take into account the people who are not reapplying for employment. The positive thing was that two of the companies that presented, private companies, pointed out that they had used their resources to do internal training and development, and they had found that that was a way to be successful. And there was some suggestions by the luncheon speaker about how to address the unemployment issue, but it was so theoretical in his part, and not ones that like when instead of extending unemployment, we should create a job, which is easy to say, but I think it's kind of difficult in the execution. And anyway,
Well, I think that it's happening, but it's not.
Not with the momentum we would like to see.
That's right.
And it's really, it's
I
really
mean, I just
unfortunate.
look at vacant stores that were vacant 6 months ago that are now being rented, and their business is moving in there.
Ça va?
Hi, Sarah.
Ça va bien et vous?
Yeah.
Oh.
You know, it's all French to me.
Yeah, it's unfortunate the momentum hasn't really gotten to what I call a pace that can be recognized, that we're seeing a real upturn. People are really in trouble right now.
Right.
Really in trouble.
Yeah.
And I hope that some of the things that we talked about as far as Open Cape and some of the other things that we're supporting actually leads to some opportunity for people.
Well, the paper said Cape Wind was going to begin construction soon.
They're selecting the finalists for
Yeah.
the construction piece, although they didn't, in the Globe, it didn't tell you who they were.
No.
Did you some of those meetings on the national grid and the rates and that sort of thing, there was a series of meetings being held. Did you, were any near you up there?
I didn't go to any, but they were trying to break down what the costs were and where the cost components were, and it's 12.5 cents for the energy,
1.2.
6.5 I think was for the RECs, and then 1.5 was for something
It's
else.
21 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah, is the total. They were trying to give you some perspective on what.
It's 21 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's being integrated into the rate as they pick it up.
So how is everybody feeling about that up there?
They're starting to become, especially from the business community, we heard Walmart started
yes.
saying, wait, Walmart thought they were concerned about how that was going to impact. So I think the business community, more than the homeowner ratepayer, is starting to have some concerns about what the impact of that might be.
Interesting. Yeah.
The homeowner,
You don't have any
because
way.
it's always said, well, this will be $1 a month. And don't quote me on that number, but they always, that's how they portray
parse it out, so it's not, you really take it in a cumulative.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd rather 21 cents versus 14 or 15 or whatever we can price out.
Sheila, did you want
I do have
to make any report?
I do have, well, we've sort of talked about all of the different discussions we had, but there is one other discussion that goes back to our septic loan. I was presented, now, number one, did you follow up with that gentleman who's...
Bob Troy will be following up with him in terms of payment plan.
Okay, good. All right, so that's going to work. The other one is, actually there's two. The other one is another gentleman received a septic loan. I don't think anything has been done yet. But he has applied for a second mortgage, not a second mortgage, what do you, re-up, refinancing, right, refinancing, that's the word, it escaped my head. Refinancing of his home for a better rate. Since he has done that, or is able to do that, he is not in need of the loan.
Yeah.
So he, even though it's been authorized,
Right.
but not used, tapped into yet,
Right.
and he's being told that he cannot not do it.
Well, I'm surprised at that. It doesn't seem to make sense.
So there is
Because we also have a process where people can pay the loan back with, before the expiration of the 20
Right.
years, and those types of things.
right.
There is a penalty.
I'll have to find out. This is not something
All right.
I'm
So
aware
should I have
of,
that person call you directly and
Yeah,
just
sure.
ask questions and
Yeah.
just so you'll have a clear understanding as to where we're
Exactly.
going? Okay.
And he had talked to Kendall?
I'm sorry.
He had talked to Kendall about this?
Yes, he did speak. This was being related to me by a friend of theirs, so the name had escaped that person, but I believe it was Kendall because they
It's
said the
totally
person
Kendall.
in charge. Because I named.
Okay, so you weren't talking to the person directly that had the problem, but somebody that was reporting on the person that
They
had the problem.
have referred the case to my attention, so
Yeah,
I'm
but
just
send it my way.
following up.
We'll figure out what's
Okay.
going on.
And the other thing is this woman with the taxes, and the commissioners could say, we agree with her, she should have an abatement to her taxes. Well, it's over the fact now, but is there any recourse we can?
I don't know.
We have
Okay.
no-
I know of a case we've had with Bourne.
Uh-huh.
There was a gentleman from Bourne who
No, it's not.
his
They just-
actually tax abatement issue did get screwed up Bourne and they admitted of it so much. Bourne tried to abate his taxes and then he refused.
Oh,
Is the understanding I have. So Bob Troy basically looked into this and basically said you don't have an adjudicable case to bring to the commissioners since Bourne already tried to abate your tax from this year in question. What had happened was he came to the commissioners, we forward that, as you know, to the town. The town has the right to either select going to the state appellate tax board or leaving it with the commissioners. 99.999% of the time, in fact it's only happened once that I can recall in the 14 or so years I've been here, the town will take it to the appellate tax board.
okay.
And in this case, the town board missed the deadline to go to the appellate tax board. So
Oh,
it would have been here, but for whatever reason, timeliness, whatever, it never got heard. So he went back to the town. The town did abate his taxes, but as far as I understand, he refused to take that abatement. So
well, for what
that's the only outstanding issue that I know.
I'm going to bring this letter, and I did make a couple of calls over just to find out, and I can't seem to be getting the right person. He's not the gentleman either. I just miss him, so I'll give it to you and just see if there's any room left. I think June 9th was the day the taxes went into effect.
Well, maybe were we talking about the same thing? Are you talking about a property tax abatement?
Yes.
Yeah. The time deadline is pretty strict.
Yes,
If
I
you
know.
miss it, you miss it. That's
I
just
know.
the way it goes.
Well, in some ways, she didn't miss it. I'm just not sure if I handled it officially enough to make it on the record. So,
Okay.
I would do that status post. So, all right.
All
And
right.
that's all I have.
Do we have any other business?
Just one other thing. Monday night, we went to there was a candidates night held by the Suicide Prevention Coalition.
Oh,
over
yes, that's
Barnstable
right. We
High
were
School.
there, right.
And it was well attended. And I believe that for those who went there, it was encouraging to me to see those people both running for elected office and incumbents speak to how important it was to continue to support the effort, especially for the youth suicide prevention, piece of it. It was on tape, so I believe it will be shown in the town of Barnstable at least, going forward. And there were some very interesting and very insightful stories about how nobody escapes with regard to being connected to that, to that unfortunate problem. So anyway, that was that.
Do you know that while I was sitting there, I mean, I had mentioned a few people that I'd known, like two of the gentlemen in my neighborhood growing up, and, as I say, for my brother and I, these were, like, people you looked at as solid people, foundations of your neighborhood for that to happen. A cousin's daughter, also just recently, Ashley. And I was in a brownie troop, and I was the brownie mother. And
there's the brownie.
And there's my brownie. And the pressures that are put on children today, as far as having to, if you don't have certain things at certain levels, it seems to me, I mean, we felt this down in Maryland particularly, it's very competitive. You feel like you're almost like a loser by the time of third grade or something. And you could feel that.
Long? Well, second grade.
I know. Well, and of course we tried to lighten that load in Girl Scouts so that, you felt like there was other things of life other than having to do this task. And one of her little chums, one of my girls, I mean, she started feeling all this anxiety, and I think it was this offshoot of May. They put her on Paxil, like at 10 years old, and she killed herself at 10.
At 10.
Is that amazing?
No. Unfortunately, as much of a shock to hear that
I know.
age, if you take a look at the statistics, there is a statistically significant number of children that are indeed what do we call it, completing.
Yeah. It's a very frightening. Sarah does not like the topic at all, and
who can blame them?
And with that, I'm just going to
On that
introduce
note,
a member of the audience. Do you have any public comment that you would like to make before the commission is over?
I think I'm okay.
Okay.
It's okay.
This is my
Okay,
daughter.
Any public
Oh, we do.
I do, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we're now
Then we're going to move into executive session.
For the purposes of discussing negotiations with non-union personnel,
Okay.
not to return to open session. I don't have anything else.
Okay.
Those are already yes.
Flynn, aye.
Lyons, aye.
Okay. So,
And you-
I said aye.
Yeah.
Flynn, aye.